So, this is not a regularly scheduled introduction or a regularly scheduled live. I have got a proper live coming later, which is the ships that Fisher scrapped, but it was somehow, thanks to YouTube and the myriad of things, scheduled for 2:40 this afternoon. I wasn't going to run it then because I didn't have everything ready. I've still got a couple slides to get ready now. But honestly, today's been a sort of downward day. The rest of the week's been sort of mixed. It had a very good day yesterday, and I thought, frankly, instead of, as I didn't manage to record any introduction yesterday because I was away down at the Fleet Aero Museum for quite so long, I thought I would do a quick live introduction. That means I'm not probably going to be responding to questions because I haven't opened up the questions yet, but I'll have a go in a second and open them up. The Orlando class. Now, I was, of course, talking about them because of Aurora and Galatea being members of this class in a previous generation. This is their generation names before the names which come out in Model 1. But this class were very much vessels for peacekeeping, vessels for presence around the world. They are armoured cruisers, certainly of a type, and they are quite well armed for that. They have a decent, sufficient firepower to do what they need to do in their role. Now, what is that firepower? Well, they're considered, when they're first built, first-class armoured cruisers. They displace roughly 6,000 tons, 5,600 tons officially, but things get added on quite a lot. They're 91 meters or 300 feet long. They're 56 feet wide or 17 meters beam, and they have a draft of 6.9 meters or 22.5 feet. Their installed power, and please note this is what we're saying, is installed power, is roughly 8,500 horsepower. That's not their shaft horsepower, that's their installed power, i.e. the power generation the engines are rated with. They had 3-cylinder triple expansion steam engines, driving 2 shafts, all powered by 4 double-ended boilers. Their top speed was 17 knots in natural draft, 18 knots in forced draft, which is an interesting phrase. And they had a range of 10,000 nautical miles at 10 knots. So they'd have been fairly good ships for the Imperial policing, which is exactly what they were used for. Their complement was fairly heavy, 484, but that roughly fits with the light cruisers and cruisers that we were talking about earlier in the week. They carried 2 9.2-inch Mark V or Mark VI guns in single mounts, fore and aft. They had 10 6-inch guns ranged around the ship in various positions, and 6 6-pounders or 57 millimeters around the ship as well, plus 10 3-pounder or 47 millimeter guns around the ship, and 6 18-inch torpedo tubes, 4 for an above water broadside, 1 bow and 1 stern submerged. So basically, she could fire 2 either side and 1 forward or 1 aft. Plus, she had a 10-inch belt with a 12-inch conning tower. This was to all their ships. They are a good design. They are a balanced design. And quite capable for it. So, I hope you enjoyed the Orlando class, but let's think about them. What do? They serve in China. They take part in a Boxer rebellion. They do all sorts of random things during their service. Hello, Derp Squad, John Luke, and Carl Harmon. Plebiscite, Derp Squad. Oh, Derp Squad, sorry. Whose coat was HMS Galatea guarding between 1898 and 1903? Whose coast? Sorry, spelling mistake. I've called her a coat guard. Yeah. Thank you. That's good. But no, they were the UK British Coast Guard ships. These ships were used for many. The later one will have that correct. Many different roles, and they did it well. I'm not sure why Undaunted has got clipped off the bottom of this particular one. I will have to figure that one out later. Probably the thing is all too big, but we'll see what we can do. Yeah, fix that one for later as well. They were used as Coast Guard ships, they were used as reserve ships, they were used as lots of different roles, and they were very successful in them. They were a useful class of ships. So why does Fisher get rid of them? Well, it's one of the things that really interests me that he does get rid of them, because actually he keeps quite a lot of ships which are older than them, and I would argue less capable than them. So, I don't know. But we're getting into this more later. And as I said, this is a quick sort of introduction and a quick couple of questions to whet your appetite for this afternoon's discussion. Because this afternoon's discussion, there is no way I could cover all the classes, all the individual ships properly. So what I've done is I've picked 9 illustrative classes, and I've done them in various different ways to see what works for each class. And some of the ships are kept and some of the ships aren't, to explain why they are not. And I've done a discussion of Admiral Fisher's thinking and why he thinks the way he does. But he is a bit nutty, I have to admit, on this one. This class, Strub, how do they operate? Mostly independent or with support? Mostly independent. They were operating on the China and Australia stations where there was no infrastructure. John Luke, 9.2s, as would have been on the RN Supercruiser, technical and logistical ease. This is the interesting thing. This was a 9.2 inch was a regular caliber. So close. Was a regularly used caliber prior to the First World War, and even some ships in the First World War were carrying out. It is a natural thing. If the treaties hadn't happened, my instinct is 9.2 would have come back, because that's really the upper end of where you want the cruisers to be. Carl Hammond, why was the 9.2 inch used instead of the 8 inch or 11 inch? Well, that's an interesting thing. We actually know on the Orlando class why it was chosen. 8 inch was considered not to have enough stopping power. 11 inch was considered too slow to fire, too difficult, too complicated to maintain at long range. 9.2 inch was considered the sweet spot for what will be a first-rate armoured cruiser or a heavy cruiser, and the phraseology that's given of it. And therefore they go for the 9.2 inch. The Orlando class are quite cool, and I do enjoy them. John Luke, did Fisher determine what goes or stays by the Jeremy Clarkson scale? Power, speed. I think he honestly decides, and hello Zachary Garkin, don't think I've seen you before. I think honestly Fisher decides what will go or stay by what he thinks is most likely to put up an argument and most likely to cause a big fight. The Orlando class were mostly in reserves and various other things, so he thought he could get away with it. And he could as well. He did. That's the thing. He got away with it. But let me find the other picture of this Orlando class, which I'm not going to use in the full presentation, but which I can use in the discussion of the Orlando class, because there you go. As you can see, they are quite well-balanced ships. They have a nice flow of their weaponry. They have a nice status of their weaponry. It's positioned well to give it a good all-round fire. You can see the 6 inches. You can see the various different pounded guns and where they are going. And you can also see in this one nicely the armor, the midsection, the shaping of the hull. This was actually a very well designed ship, and you find, kind of interestingly, when I'm looking through some of my dad's old naval architecture, Institute of Naval Architecture manuals, they refer back to these ships because they were considered such a good hull design, such an efficient hull design. And it's I have to say, there have been some images, some interesting things, because I was told that HMS Immortality never went out to the Far East, in one source. And there is a picture of her firing a salute to Queen Victoria's birthday in Japan. So, yeah. And that was actually used by someone saying, oh, this is the reason she was decommissioned. She was never actually used for that role. And I went, well, there's a picture of her firing a salute to Queen Victoria in Japan on Queen Victoria's birthday. So, yeah, she was used it. Dep Squad, I've decided I want a protected cruiser to guard my coat anyway. I think it would be a solid investment in personal security. I think it would, and I highly recommend the Orlando class. They're really quite cute. Carl Harmon, did Fisher go, can I use it in a battle? Oh, no, okay, but I think that's honestly what he's thinking about. Does this have a role in a major fleet battle? And of course, the thing is, the best cruisers are not really about fleet battles. We talk about the Napoleonic period. If you were a frigate, how often would you try and stand up against a ship at a line? Not solo, not often, if you could avoid it. The point about a cruiser is its presence it gives you, the protection it gives to your trade, and all these things. Standing up in battle in the battle line is not a good decision for designing your cruisers. What type of vessels will be to counter this class? Any other really armored cruiser, or possibly a battle cruiser? Jennifer, what's the 9.2-inch gun was based on the army requirement for a heavy artillery piece that could be hand loaded? The shell size being ruled by mass weight. To an extent, it was also, you have to remember, sometimes in the Boxer Rebellion, these ships actually had guns taken off and used to support the troops ashore. We're fairly sure none of the 9.2s were next, but you know. That's the thing. This class were very effective cruisers. But as I'll be getting into, they go, and another class which is arguably less effective actually survives. Also, personally, I'd have felt the sheer number of 6-inch guns on these ships makes them very effective counter-destroyer vessels, but you know. Jonathan, these ships must have had a fairly large crews. Was that a major reason for them coming? As I've been through, they had a crew of about 480. It's not a massive crew, and by the end of their career, most of them were reservist ships. Now, you'd have to think, okay, fine, so what are they? Really, really old? Well, they're not old. Because, hello, John Shea, this won't be going on for massively much longer. I'll make it 20 minutes. But they're mostly commissioned. They are mostly less than 15 years old when they are sold for scrap. Okay? Their first commission is 1888. 1902 is some of their last commissions, but, you know, some of them are scrapped in 1905. Okay, yeah, that's actually more than 15 years. Sorry. They supposedly spend less than 15 years in commission. And they are mostly less than 20 years old. In fact, I think every single one of them is less than 20 years old when they're scrapped. These are not old ships. This is the thing. One of the things you often hear reverted about by Fisher's reforms, etc., is he was scrapping old ships of the Royal Navy. Not really. 20 years is not that old a ship when you consider some of the things he does keep hold of. Carl Harmon, I get the idea the Doctor would like to go back and stop Fisher. As you'll be hearing when I'm talking to, I actually agree with a lot of Fisher's ideas. I don't agree with how he implemented them. But that will be coming in later. So, I hope you've enjoyed this. Oh, Dope Squad, wondering if they had issues with dodgy machinery or something similar? Something that made them less favourable than other classes? All the records are they were liked by their crews. They were really quite good ships. They wandered around and they really did have a 10,000 nautical mile range. They were used in the Pacific and would often do what was, very long range movements. In fact, one of them disturbed the Americans by turning up at an island, and the Americans were going, "How did you get here?" Because the Americans were expecting the British ship to have to go by another island, so they had a ship there waiting to meet the British ship and to send a signal that the British were on their way. And because they were in an Orlando-class cruiser, the captain went, "We're going straight for that island," and had a coal ship come and meet them. So they did well. Sean Mack, it feels like Fisher went down the list for the scrapping and the first ship he found that he didn't want rather than working from the bottom up. Yep. That's good. Maybe Fisher didn't need a protected cruiser to guard his coat anymore? Possibly. That would have been quite... if our spelling mistakes go, we're going to go with that one being quite a funny one. I'm now going to call the Orlando class the coat guard. Jennifer, my thoughts are based on the fact that most heavy artillery pieces were made by only one or two companies for both the Army and the Navy in the late Victorian era. Oh, yes. Zachary Gaggan, is there a good place to look where the ship classes that Fisher got rid of are listed? Not really. In fact, I have to say my experience so far has been it's been added until I managed to find someone else has written a book to the book list of books which I need to get around to doing. The ships that Fisher scrapped. Because so far everything I've read has been going, this was an old ship, and I'm going, it's less than 20 years old from the point to which the first steel was laid to the point of being scrapped. That's not an old ship. Guns, is there a book you can recommend naval history from this period? Massey's Dreadnought is a bit late. Freeman has a book, I think. Hi, RF4. Hope you're okay. Let me just check up Freeman's cruiser books. Freeman, Victoria, cruisers. Yeah. British Cruisers of the Victorian Era by Norman Freeman. That is good. That is good. I'm not sure I agree with everything he says, but I have to say quite a lot of what he says I do agree with. Can you rename the live to include the Forgotten Cloak Guard? Give me a second. John Luke, if Jackie Fisher had gotten his way, he would have built one ship, one shop to rule them all. Possibly. The incomparable. But actually, me and Drac were having a very interesting discussion about that the other day, which might make it into the Toronto discussions, because it was a lot of fun to figure out what might have happened to Incomparable if she'd been under construction when the treaties had been declared and the end of World War One. Steam, Steel, and Shellfire by Lambert and Gardner might be a decent book to cover the era. Covers 1815 to 1905. I must say I've never read it, though. That's Nicholas Lambert, and you see, sometimes he produces absolutely exceptional books, and sometimes he produces books which are definitely not exceptional. They're always usually interesting sources, though. So if that is his book, yeah, I haven't read it though, so I'd have to read it before I could recommend it. Strub, was technology progression slowing? Because 20 years before, these ships would have faced USS Monitor. And let's be honest, if they'd faced USS Monitor would have been in trouble. Although they would have had to hang back quite a bit to be able to aim their guns low enough to hit the Monitor. So probably they'd have ended up ramming them. Hi, Dan Freeman. You're early. I was out for a run. This is just a quick introduction to the Orlando class, because they're cute, and I promised an apology because it was originally scheduled. The regular live had decided to schedule it to 2:40 this afternoon. So I'm going to take last questions, and then I am going to go and get on with preparing for this afternoon's full live and make sure I have all the pictures okay. Lucas Jones, hello. In the 1850s and 60s, a ship could have been obsolete in less than 15 years. Maybe Fisher was up to something innovative? You see, the thing is, I think Fisher, and this I'll be getting into more later, Fisher, as we already mentioned, is very focused on fighting a big battle in Europe. And that's true. But the problem is, you get rid of some ships like this, and this is one of the classes I would put in that list, which, frankly, I would have kept around, because whilst I wouldn't have wanted them to go up against the Asiatic Squadron, definitely not on their own, if they had managed to bump into a surface raider, i.e., like HMAS Sydney, the First World War one, or any of the other town class cruisers or various other cruisers around there, they'd be more than capable of dealing with them. And if you'd had these ships out there, they could have plodded along with convoys quite happily, able to get to 10 knots, cruise steam for 10,000 nautical miles. There aren't many surface raiders which are going to want to tangle with a ship with 9.2-inch guns, and definitely not that many 6-inch guns. And they're far more economical to run than the big cruise liners, which they started doing as armed merchant cruisers. So, yeah, I'd have kept these on. Right, last questions. Hello, John Luke and Buckamere. Hello. Dan Freeman, I was reading that Fisher was appointed to cut the budget for the Navy and successfully do that. That was basically how he got the post. He promised he would cut the budget. And he did cut the budget. They could do the USS Texas tactic of flooding a bit, but aim on the flooded side for gun depression instead of the opposite side for elevation, hit the monitor. Potentially. They'd have to do something. Dan Freeman, Squad, most of these ships had impressive rams as the anticipated ranges were so close that it was a good way of sinking the enemy. As you can actually see, again, if we extend out the picture before I go, you can actually see the pronounced ram, especially on HMS Aurora in that picture, and also in HMS Undaunted, the water being shifted up by it, the ram. It is Honestly, Zumwalt would have been proud of having a ram like that. Cheaper, better, lower crew. I'm intrigued why these went. Plus, rates of fire were slow and they used black powder for propellant and bang. That was monitor more than these ones. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting discussion because, as I said, there are some classes I agree with Fisher. I'm just going, why are they there? But there are classes I don't understand why he kept, and classes I don't understand why he got rid of because I can't see the good argument for it. The one argument which you could potentially come with is these ships had been used a lot in their life and so therefore had done a lot of cruising. But they were nowhere near their full service life by any stretch of the imagination. And they, as I said, in World War One, there would have been some admirals on stations who would have loved to have had these knocking around. Because, again, yes, you might have the enemy might have cruisers which are faster, but that has a 10-inch belt and a 12-inch armoured conning tower. A 10-inch thick belt. Okay? That's not something you want. You're going to not... If that's in a convoy with a load of merchants protecting them, there aren't many surface raiders which are going to think, you know what, that convoy looks tasty. Most surface raiders are going to think, that convoy looks like indigestion. I'm going to go elsewhere. I think I have an urgent appointment over that way. That way. Anyway, but not that way. No, definitely no. Please, carry on, Mr. Convoy. Salute, we love you. We're up the British. We're going this way. Quickly. And maybe that's why the scrap. Fisher hated armored conning towers. He built them in every ship afterwards himself. So, I don't know. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this quick introduction. It's nearly a half an hour, so I'm going to answer a couple more questions, and then I'll get it. How would they have fared in the Adriatic? In World War One, with their 6-inch guns and their rapid-firing complement of other weapons? They could have done quite well, especially in the beginning of the Adriatic contest. Maybe, but later part, not so good. Carl Harmon, okay, still ridiculously thick for a cruiser, I think. It is until you remember that these are armored cruisers. They are very much... You have to remember, in this period, you're talking armored cruiser. Battleship is above the level above, but then there's armored cruiser below. So armored cruiser is the next generation level below battleship. And then it goes protected cruiser. And then there's second class protected cruiser. And then there's scout cruiser. And then there's torpedo boat. And coming along, torpedo boat destroyer. This is the sort of scenario you're doing. These are second class to only battleships. And they are first and second rate battleships as well. But these are second only to battleships, and as status on foreign stations, they are big, powerful ships. Anyway, thank you very much. See you all in about an hour and 45 minutes. I'm off to drink a lot of iron brew and finish about half a dozen slides off. Make sure they're all neat and tidy. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone. Take care, and see you in an hour and 45 minutes. Take care.